what I saw was an opening for something that was music related, but not what the other things were that were there. And I think that got the attention of the people at Kickstarter, because I think they were looking for projects that are different.
Hello musician, hello music enthusiasts. I'm creating a series of videos, of interviews, a little bit like in a podcast format, talking with different musicians about their views and understanding of the reality that we live now, about the new formats, the new ways of creating music, of creating arts, and delivering, communicating, share this music with their audiences. And in this video, I talk with Joel Pierson, pianist, composer, and author of a series of books. We're going to start watching the beginning of the original video of his campaign. Just a little excerpt.
Hi, I'm Dr. Joel Pierson, and I'm here to tell you that you are really bad at the piano. So bad, in fact, that I'm writing a book all about it. It's called You Suck at Piano. And I'm pretty sure it's the first piano method book ever to be written to include copious amounts of insults, irreverent comic strips about lives of famous musicians, and cocktail recipes for you to drown all of your own piano-related frustrations.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk about your project, a little bit of your career, your history,
Sure.
Specifically about crowdfunding. First, I would love to hear, why did you decide to do a crowdfund campaign?
I had this idea for a music education book that was geared towards adults, that was going to be kind of, like very realistic in approaches to how to try to learn to play the piano as an adult. And I thought the way to reach people would be through humor. So the idea was to make it kind of mean, I guess, like not actually mean, but like a little mean sometimes. So the book was called You Suck at Piano, and so it was just about how we're all, I mean, really the theme of the book is that it's hard for all of us, no matter how good we get. It's still hard to play music. It can be fun and rewarding, but there's this whole other side that people don't like to talk about, which is just how hard it is. So that's the idea behind the book. So there was like little piano pieces to learn with instructions, but there was also like cocktail recipes, so you could like have a drink when you get frustrated, and comic strips about how the famous composers lived and died these horrible lives, things like that. And so I wasn't really sure what I should do, if I should try to get a publisher or something, but it was such an odd little book where I don't think any music publisher would want something like that. And a normal book publisher doesn't really do music. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try crowdfunding, because I do feel like there is an audience for that. And so, yeah, that's how I started working with Kickstarter. And then I've done 4 or 5 at this point.
I look at the book, and for me it was fascinating to see, because it's a very, as you said, it's a very unique approach. I never saw anything like it.
Right, right.
And it kind of goes into the direction. I'm like reading different people and saying how we live now in a world that we have so many different niches, and we can reach to so many different people. So you were like tapping into some waters that you were probably the first one, or one of the first ones,
right,
to go with this approach. And I would imagine it probably resonated with many people. I was reading on your website, there was a little bit of a viral Kickstarter campaign. And
right.
I'm curious how all this happened. How was your feeling about all that?
Well, I needed about $15,000 to get the book finished off, but I felt like asking for that much money was not appropriate. It seemed like too much money, so I asked, I think, for $8,000 or something, which would not have. I would have had to find the rest of the money, but I just sort of thought it looked, better. It's not. I don't think it's ever good in crowdfunding to set your goals so high that people look and say, "What does this person need?" Because no one knows except for you what your expenses really are, and it's not really. You shouldn't really be telling everybody what your expenses are, because the second you say, "Oh, it cost me $5,000 for graphic design," you're going to get 20 emails from people saying, "You're stupid. I know someone who's way better, who's cheaper," and you have to be careful with these things. So I saw, well, $15,000 is what I need. I don't think that's a good thing to ask for. So I asked for 8, but within, I think, 24 hours, we had like 20,000 or something. So it very quickly, people just started sharing it, and we're running ads on social media and all those things too. So, I mean, calling it viral is not totally accurate. I mean, I know I use that a little bit, that term, but amongst a certain group of people, people that might be interested in music sort of casually, adults that took piano lessons when they were kids and they quit because it wasn't the right time for them or whatever. Among those kinds of people, I think it was shared around the internet pretty quickly.
Very interesting. I'm curious to know a little bit about how do you reach people, and who are the people that end up like being interested in the project. And you said that you like soon reach the goal and much beyond the goal. So
right.
I was curious, and you said like there was this factor, the sharing factor, that people were sharing and finding the project super interesting, super unique, and probably like, especially because what you mentioned about the jokes and the different approach, is a very shareable project in that sense. I think it's
right.
super cool. So I would love to hear how this happened and how you saw all that happening.
Yeah, sure. Well, when I was thinking about doing, Kickstarter, I was looking through the music projects, and most of them are just people raising money for their albums, people needing $5,000 to $10,000 for a record, which is not a lot of money for a record, but you can do it depending on the situation for that little. And there's a lot of that on Kickstarter, right? So for Kickstarter, music is very famous. People know that people go there to raise money for things, but they tend to be these small amounts, and they tend to be for the same kinds of things. Maybe it's a jazz record, maybe it's a rock record, it's whatever, excuse me, but it tends to be, whatever, looking for $10,000 for this, for that, forever. So what I saw was an opening for something that was music related, but not what the other things were that were there. And I think that got the attention of the people at Kickstarter, because I think they were looking for projects that are different. So they were able to promote the project through their own channels. And then I said I was running ads and things, but I think a big part of this early success was the video that I shot for the project. Again, it's about looking at everyone's videos and seeing what seems to work and what looks really nice and what you think could be improved on, and then just trying to improve on it, right? I found a lot of people were very serious and earnest in asking for money, but I'm not sure that is always what makes people want to give that money. I was going for more of a like, I'm going to do this anyway. If you want in, I know that you're terrible at the piano, so like, what do you have to lose? Like, don't be a chicken, kind of like attitude. That people were like, well, that's not what I'm used to seeing in a Kickstarter video. Like, there was a bit of like an attitude, I guess, a little bit to it. Or hopefully it was like, fun, but I wasn't out there like, doing this kind of like, oh, it means the world to me if, these kinds of things. Blah, blah, blah. So that sense of humor, I think, goes a long way. And that also goes a long way when you're trying to, if you're trying to get people to share the project, if you're trying to get it passed on social media. People don't want to watch someone talk for 10 minutes about anything, really. They want like, whatever, you get 10 seconds of someone's time or something, and you have to hit them with something that will catch their attention and keep them moving. So for me, it was like, oh, maybe I can like tell a few like joke insults in the first like 10 or 15 seconds of this video with some like cartoons showing up and weird sound effects and things. And people will be like, well, like, what is this? So I think a combination of those things, like both there being like a space for it in the crowdfunding market, and then a sense of levity and humor. I think those things together helped it a lot in the beginning.
Makes a lot of sense. And I feel like the uniqueness of the project, and also the approach, like make, as I mentioned, like very shareable. And also there's another element that I found interesting, because it was like the story, like, because it's a very, it has a different aura. And you're talking, I saw you like you walking in this edge, like, as you say, like kind of insulting a little bit and making joke and drawing people in. So it was a very like fine line that you walk very nicely. I watched the video. Right. The video is super entertaining. And I'm curious, people who end up like supporting, being part of the project, are people who already followed you before or already interested in your work, or random people that never heard of you and because of this project then became part of your story and your fan base and all that?
Right. These are mainly new people that didn't know who I was. Crowdfunding sites have this kind of social media angle to them, but in a sort of less corrupted than Facebook or Twitter or something, right? I mean, we do, obviously social media is so popular because we do like this, like discovering people and being able to talk to people and look at photos and post video. Like, obviously we're wired for this, which is why it's taken over society. But we're also really cynical, right? Like everyone says, well, I go on Facebook, but only once in a while, or, I stop my account, or I should get off. And with something like Kickstarter, it feels much more pure, I think, where people are really putting themselves out there. Oh, I had this idea, and then they're writing these posts, things that are very similar to social media, and you may not know them, but you really get to know them. And then if the person doing the project is doing a good job, they'll write you back. Like if you post something on the wall saying can't wait to get this product or whatever, and then they'll write you a note, they'll follow up, or if you write them a private message, they'll follow you. So it really mimics social media, but it's really controlled. There's no like Russian bot farms on there, or like these kinds of things that we've come to expect from, logging on to Facebook or whatever. So I think that people are attracted to that, and they like that, and they want to interact with people in that way, kind of like Facebook was 10, 15 years ago or whatever, before it feels so corrupted.
Super interesting. That leads me to an interesting point that I never thought about, like Kickstarter or any of those other websites as a social media platform. And I'm thinking about the campaign that I want to do, and my original idea was to do it on my website.
Okay.
Which has, I think, as an advantage, because I feel that I can communicate with people in a very direct way, and the way I want. But then you mentioned about this element of people seeing you on Kickstarter from people who are already interested in participating in projects. So how many of the people, or how much of the support that you had came, you feel, from people from Kickstarter that found you on Kickstarter?
Right. Well, it's Kickstarter has a very loyal kind of base of people that will just go on and browse and look for interesting things, so you do get some eyes right away that are people who are very interested in supporting random stuff. I mean, I do that every once in a while. You go on and pick a category and you just look at fun things, and you pledge on this or that or whatever, and you kind of follow the story, right? So it is you're like building this little social media thing already. So it's hard for me to say how many people were already on Kickstarter or came to it from an ad or from a share or something. But I think it's a good mix of both.
Nice. I'm also curious about, because one element that I see about all these campaigns and this kind of project is it's a very inclusive project, that you draw your audience and people interested as part of the process. You can communicate with them, as you mentioned. They can write you something on your project. You can respond.
Yeah.
So I would be curious to learn from you, how was your experience with this relationship with people who supported the project?
There's a certain percentage of projects that never get finished, right? Like 10% on Kickstarter or something. And people kind of know that there's always a chance that they'll pledge $10 or $50 on something, and then it just disappears, and they never see the product. So what that does is that leaves an opening for people who are really proactive. When I did the first campaign, the book was done. It hadn't been printed yet, but it wasn't like I'm raising money to write this book. It was like, I wrote the book. If you want a copy, this is how you can buy it, kind of, So you can really draw people in when you can already show them what it is, and not when you're just sitting and talking about what it might be eventually. I mean, it's pretty hard to get people interested that way. So I was able to every week release whatever, 5 pages or 10 pages of the book and say, oh, this is in this and this and this. And people see that it's already basically done. And then people start writing and saying, oh, wow, this is exciting. Like this clearly always is going to happen. You're already so far along in the process. It feels really good to see a project like this, because like most people, we operate behind the timelines that we say we're going to set for ourselves, right? Because things happen. And that happened to me. The printer had like a problem with one of the machines that prints the binding or something, and we lost a couple of weeks or whatever. So those things are going to happen. So the more prepared you are up front, the more I think it just looks better compared to some other people, and that it really helps engage people along the way.
Wonderful. I'm curious. I was seeing you have quite an interesting also career as a writer, as a band leader. You have like many different areas, artistic achievements. Super nice. I'm curious how this audience talk to one another, because probably people follow you or are interested in your work because of the work you do with the cartoon music, or some other people more of your classical music and jazz music.
Right.
And I'm curious if there is a overlap of audiences, or if people who knew from one thing then migrated to the other. How did it happen?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I've always tried to figure out how to, like, what the common theme is in the different projects that I have. And I suppose the common theme is that I'm trying to use humor in music on some level. So if I'm performing old scores from cartoons, like with like a live jazz band or something, it's sort of funny by nature. There's funny moments, there's sound effects, or I'll tell jokes and things in between songs, and there's a humor element there. And then these books have a lot of humor in them. Hopefully, people think they're funny. As for people going back and forth between the projects, I haven't seen as much of that as people always ask me about. People are always saying like, "Oh, great, just when something happens with this project, post it to these people, and then you'll get this like whatever synergy or whatever." And I don't really know if that's. I think it's important for people to know what I'm doing, but the idea that they're going to automatically jump onto the other, project as it moves, I don't want to spend too much time bothering people with that. They'll come over and they'll see something else I'm working on if they want to, and if not, that's fine. So people are always asking, like how to utilize those connections, and I don't think I really know. But I don't have a good answer, at least for you.
Yeah, but what he said about sometimes if you're interested in one thing doesn't mean you're interested. Maybe you're like a beginner pianist, or you want to play, but you're not super into classical music, and
Right.
modern music. So different audiences. But I was curious.
And you don't want to be told all the time to go look at something else either.
Right.
Like you want to be told. I think that like one time, someone finding out like, oh, this person does these other things. Like I don't need to like keep reminding people.
Makes a lot of sense. Shifting a little bit the sides, you mentioned that you sometimes or often like support different projects. When you are looking for something that you want to be part of, you want to support, what calls your attention in a project?
Oh, that's a good question. I suppose for me, if I'm going on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or something, I'm probably just looking for a product that I would find useful. And a lot of people are like that, but not everybody, because my experience as a creator is that people want to kind of tag along with the process with something I'm working on, but I don't really do that for other projects. So I think what that means is that there's different kinds of people that are going to crowdfunding websites, and there's people, like a Kickstarter has a very big footprint in like board games and comic books and all this kind of stuff. And those people are really attached to those artists that are making those products. And so maybe my products are a little bit like that, in the sense that some people, wanted to, see, I don't know, just wanted to just attach themselves to the process early on so they could see what was happening. But yeah, I don't do that so much. For me, it's like, oh, a cool watch or something, and I would,
Right.
It's put the money in.
It's a little bit of like you want to see this project going forward, and you do kind of a pre-purchase the final product. Is
Sure.
that the approach that you're thinking about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to see all the possibilities of these platforms. I noticed that you did one book and then you did other five, right?
There's five. Yeah, I think so.
So a total
Yeah.
of six books. I wonder how this happened, how the campaigns were different one from the other. How was your experience with this? Also, this all this crowdfunding campaign is relatively new for me. I never did any, and
Yeah.
I heard people saying that this is a very nice model for do different projects and continue your work. But at the same time,
Hmm.
me, I say I don't know. I don't feel comfortable like asking like people to be continually supporting new projects. So
Right.
I wonder how do you see all that?
Right.
What
Well,
for you?
the yeah, the success of You Suck at Piano was not going to be easily replicated again, but I know I have to kind of build a brand off of it, you know. So the first book is sort of it's a bit of it's like a sort of a shock. It's like a bit of a shock value, like, oh, what this, the name is ridiculous, the concept is funny or whatever. And of course, I picked piano. I mean, I'm a pianist, but it's also a broad topic a lot of people are interested in. So trying to follow up with other books, I knew was not going to be as successful. So I did a second project, which was a follow-up book, You Suck at Piano 2, You Still Suck. But I also wrote a third book with that, which was a book of original compositions called 20 Piano Pieces for People with Emotional Problems. And that I think is maybe the best of the books, the emotional problems book, but it wouldn't have sold anything by itself because it doesn't really have quite the universal appeal. So I tacked it on with You Suck at Piano 2, being like, here's a follow-up. If you like the first one, you'll probably like the second one. But just so you don't think I'm just doing the same thing, I actually wrote a third book, and they, you know, kind of come together, or, you know, most of the time. And that worked well. But again, you know, I think I raised half of what I did compared to the first book, or maybe even less than half, which still is I would call it a very successful project, a very successful campaign. But I don't think I don't think I'm gonna hit home runs, you know, every time like with You Suck at Piano. So, and then I did it like a guitar book, and then like a holiday book. So trying to hit things that seem sort of universal, and trying to, you know, keep people engaged that like the first project. And, you know, some people, you know, they buy every one, which is great, and some people don't.
Right. It's interesting that I was talking with different people and seeing that it is also a different approach compared to a traditional approach that you do the book and the book is ready and in the store or in your website. You create a whole with a campaign. It's a different. I would not say marketing, but in a way, it's marketing. It's a different way to present the project and to get involved.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
do you see this as a major element that why you decided to do a campaign, or was it more because what are the reasons that you feel in that regards?
Well, I was gonna do the book anyway, so that's where I came from, and I think that like I would not feel comfortable starting a crowdfunding campaign with no really clear product in mind.
Right.
I mean, if people always have something in mind, like, oh, I want to do an album of this, or I want to write a novel about this or something. But if it's not tangible enough, like I said earlier, I just don't think it's hard to get people interested unless it's, you know, they can actually see this progress. They can really kind of get a feeling for what the final product will look like, which in my case meant showing the pieces of music so that someone could say, oh, I like that piece, I know that piece, I know that music, showing the humor, showing the illustrations. So I had a lot of this stuff done up front, which means, of course, you have to front a lot of the money up front and not sure if you're going to get it back. But that's the risk versus the reward. I mean, you front some of the money up front, but then you have so much more to show, and it interests people so much more. And then I used the money from the campaign to kind of, you know, pay off the credit card bills and, you know, pay the last couple of people who agreed to wait to get paid, you know, and things like that. But it seemed to work, you know, and we raised plenty of money. I had a situation where I didn't expect. I expected that I would, like I said, I set a bar of 8,000 or something. I expected to make 8,000. Like, I think I'll make 8,000. I didn't expect to make 83,000 or whatever, right? So if the numbers go up, the budgets really move and change in ways you can't expect. And so what really happened to me is that I started selling a lot of books overseas, which is great, but it's quite expensive to ship a book overseas. It's like $25 to $30 per book. And I wasn't charging very much for international shipping, because I'm not going to ask someone to buy a $15 book and pay $28 in shipping. I mean, who's going to do that? No one's going to do that, So I think it was like $15 for the book and maybe $15 for shipping or something. So I was losing $10 or $15 per sale internationally. And I expected it not to be a big deal. Like, oh, I'll sell a couple books in England or something, and that would be it. But I ended up spending over $20,000 in international shipping.
Wow.
Maybe it was even closer to $25,000 just in shipping overseas. So, that just screwed up the whole campaign, in a sense that most of the money that I would have probably made and kept for myself ended up going, shipping books to like Pakistan and these places that I have no idea if these books even arrived sometimes. I sent a bunch of books to like Kuwait. I don't know who knows, right?
Right.
That was kind of a tangent, but that is something that is important to think about in a campaign. And whenever I talk about it, I always like to bring it up, because it's like, people say like, what was the biggest mistake or the biggest thing you didn't realize, or like, and basically like there's the possibility that it becomes so successful that it can come back and hurt your profits.
Just to finish, I would love to hear if you had any insight or anything that you learned through the process that you take with you, and if you're about to do a new project, what experience would inspire or change the path for you?
Well, I think you have to be very, very aware of what kind of awards you're offering. For the first You Suck at Piano book, we had a lot of really kind of unusual, funny rewards you could bid on. Like, my illustrator would like draw anybody's face you want on like a cocktail napkin, like playing the piano or whatever. And it only costs $5 or $10 extra to get whoever you want face on this cocktail napkin done in like a very like poor kind of funny way. But we had, I don't know, 150 of these to do, or 250, or so then you have to get pictures from all these people, and of course half of them don't reply to your emails, and then you're following, and then a year later people are writing you saying, where's my photo? And you're like, dude, like I paid that guy a year ago to do this. Like, yeah, have him do it again. But it creates a lot of interest to have these like interesting little rewards that just help you bring your numbers up. Because if whatever your product is $15, but for $20, there's some little funny thing attached to it. Most people will spend $20, but if that $5 extra, whatever that $5 costs you in time and sweat, can make it not worth it, or at least you have to be very careful about what you're offering. We had a lot of success with those little weird things, but it was like a full-time job, trying to keep up with everything. And so, but on the other hand, a lot of people, when they'll send me their Kickstarter projects or things to check out, and the rewards are very unengaging. Like, you need to have things that are really engaging and make people want to bid higher than they originally were going to. That's the whole point of that, right? Is for someone to come on to spend $20 and leave spending $50 and feel like that was a good decision, and then you get more money to finish your project. So it's just spending a lot of time thinking about what you're offering and how valuable it is to somebody, how likely they are to bid on it, and then what it's going to cost you in time on the back end.
Nice. Now I'm just curious, what are the most interesting offers that you've seen, and what are the most uninteresting offers that you have seen?
Offers, you mean like projects?
No, not projects. Like this add-ons, these little gifts that to incentivize people to engage or to bid a little bit higher.
Right. Well, I think uninteresting things are things that don't really do anything. Like if someone's making a film and then they say, we'll put your name in the credits or something, which is very common. And it's like, that doesn't really matter. You know, I mean, who cares? Someone's only going to bid on that if they feel sorry for you and it's really cheap to add. If it's $5, they'll do it maybe just to be like, oh, it's no big deal. But you're not really, I don't think you're engaging people too well. A lot of people do things like this, like, oh, well, I'll call you and we can like talk about music or whatever for an hour. And people, people, you know, kind of want to be anonymous on the internet. I don't think that anybody really wants to talk to strangers. I mean, unless you're, you know, Taylor Swift or something, then people would want to talk to you. But like, you know, no one wants to talk to me about stuff like that, you know? So I found like I would offer like, oh, a piano lesson or like this or that or something, and people just don't care about that kind of stuff. So we had a lot of success with things like, yeah, like someone's face on a cocktail napkin. We did this thing where I had my illustrator draw famous composers, and then we put like funny quotes that were not from them, but we like pretending they were theirs, and we put them on like mugs and posters and stuff, and we sold a lot of those. But then shipping mugs, you know, someone in like, you know, Greece buys like a mug and it's another $30 to get it over there. You know, you only charged $10 extra for it, and then you have to make the mug as well, so you end up losing money. But then again, you're also like, oh, that's really cool. Like that's another country that people like. You can also turn that to your advantage and say, we're sending things to 100 countries or something, which would be an unusual thing to happen in a campaign. So things that are tangible, people like, you know, sort of things, little extra things that come in the mail, I think. But again, that can be really tricky. You know, now if you're making custom postcards or something, that would be cheap. And I think people would still enjoy that. Maybe we should have thought of that. That sounds pretty good. That sounds pretty easy to do. 5 postcards in an envelope, and it costs 50 cents to send or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, what you want to avoid in general is just, if you're making a campaign, you want to avoid just being boring, I guess. You know, it has to be interesting. It has to be quick. I was talking to someone about their campaign they were doing, and it was 2 or 3 minutes up front of like footage without any talking. And it was really nicely shot footage of like this building and all these things and these musicians and stuff. But it just was like, no one's going to watch that. You know, they don't know what it is, you know? So that would be, even though it was really, really well produced, you know, it looked great. But I mean, of course you want your stuff to look professional-ish, but it doesn't have to look perfect at all, you know? So I don't know if that helps, but those are a few things that I thought about.
Thank you very much for your time and for all your knowledge and experience. It's for me, it's very interesting to see someone who were able to do, because I think it was a project that transformed into something much bigger than maybe you imagined in the beginning, and the process ended up like taking you to different directions. It's very interesting to see, and I definitely learned some ideas, some do's and don'ts.
Yeah, sure.
To this kind of project. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
And congratulations on the books and the music, beautiful music, and super fun books. Yes.
All right. Thanks, man. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you for watching this video. If you liked the conversation, please give us a thumbs up. Maybe share with a friend who might be interested in this topic. Also, I have other videos as part of this series available here on the channel. I'm going to put all the links here in the description.